moments.
Chapter 1. The Butler's Shadow. The Butler's Gift. The Otto Mansion, a grand structure overshadowed by the lush foliage of Key West, harbored an air of quiet anticipation that day. It was Eugene's birthday, and the household buzzed with subdued excitement. Amidst the festivities, the housekeeper, a woman of stern countenance and a mysterious past, presented her gift. A doll, life-sized, with features remarkably similar to young Eugene, button eyes that seemed to follow one around the room, and a stitched smile that barely concealed an eerie solemnity. At first, Eugene was delighted. He carried the doll everywhere, treating it not just as a toy, but as a confidant. The housekeeper watched from the shadows, her eyes reflecting an indecipherable emotion. The other servants whispered of strange occurrences, objects moving on their own, faint whispers in the night, and Eugene's increasingly peculiar behavior. As days turned to weeks, the family observed changes. Eugene spoke to the doll, and more disturbingly, claimed it spoke back. His laughter, once filled with childish glee, now echoed with a hollow tone. The doll's presence seemed to cast a pall over the house. Cold drafts in closed rooms, fleeting shadows in the corners of one's eyes, and an unshakable feeling of being watched. The Otto family, once skeptical, began to sense something amiss. Dinner conversations grew strained. Eugene's parents exchanged worried glances. The housekeeper maintained her silence, but her sly, knowing looks suggested a deeper understanding of the unfolding events.
In this oppressive atmosphere, the line between toy and entity blurred. The doll, Robert, became a silent observer, a bearer of an unspoken threat that lingered in the air, thick and unyielding. The once bright and joyful home transformed as if under the spell of Robert's unblinking, watchful eyes.
First, Attribution.
As the moon bathed the Otto residence in a ghostly glow, the first of many unsettling events unfolded. It began subtly, a vase shattering in an empty room, faint giggles echoing down the hallways in the dead of night. Eugene's parents initially dismissed these occurrences as their son's playful antics. However, the incidents grew more bizarre and inexplicable. Paintings would be found upside down, and Eugene's toys arranged in cryptic patterns.
One chilling night, the boundary of understanding was crossed. Eugene's father awoke to a commotion in his son's room. Rushing in, he found Eugene asleep, but the room in disarray, toys strewn about, and most alarmingly, the dull Robert seated upright in a chair, its glassy eyes seemingly gazing at Eugenia. Eugene, questioned about the chaos, insisted it was Robert's doing. His parents exchanged worried glances. A child's imagination, they reasoned, yet a nagging doubt crept into their minds. The housekeeper, always lurking in the background, remained silent, her eyes betraying no emotion. The Otto home, once filled with laughter and warmth, turned into a place where whispers and glances were exchanged in uneasy silence. Guests commented on the odd atmosphere, a certain coldness that seemed to emanate from the doll's presence. Friends of the family began to distance themselves, unease written on their faces.
Night after night, the pattern continued. Unexplainable noises, objects moving on their own, and always the doll Robert found in places no one remembered placing him. Fear began to take root in the household. a fear that something within their home was terribly amiss. Eugene's attachment to Robert only deepened, his insistence that the doll was alive growing more fervent with each passing day.
The Otto family found themselves caught in a web of inexplicable events, a series of occurrences that defied logic and reason. At the heart of it all sat Robert, a doll with a stitched smile and lifeless eyes that held a haunting depth, a silent witness to the growing dread within the walls of the Otto home.
Chapter 2. Whispering Wall. Whispers of the night. The Otto house, once a beacon of gaiety, now lay shrouded in a palpable tension. Nightfall brought an eerie calm, broken only by the whispers that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Eugene's parents lay awake, straining to understand the faint voices that disrupted the silence of their once peaceful home. These whispers, barely discernible, were laced with an unnerving cadence. Sometimes they seemed to call Eugene's name. Other times, they were just a series of unintelligible murmurs. The source was elusive, but the presence of the doll Robert in Eugene's room became a focal point of the family's growing fears. Eugene, meanwhile, grew more distant. He spent hours conversing in hushed tones with Robert, his once bright eyes now often clouded with a mix of defiance and secrecy. His parents, increasingly concerned, decided to eavesdrop one night. To their disbelief, they heard a second voice, faint and distorted, as if coming from a great distance. The chilling realization that their son might not be alone in his conversations left them frozen with fear. The Otto household staff, too, began to share their own eerie experiences. Doors creaking open without cause, cold drafts in closed rooms, and the unsettling feeling of being watched. The whispers at night seemed to grow in intensity, fostering a climate of paranoia and unease. Guests of the house commented on the strange atmosphere, some abruptly cutting their visits short. Rumors started to circulate in the community about the Otto family's haunted home. The whispers in the night became a symbol of the unexplained phenomena plaguing the residents. As the days passed, the boundary between reality and the inexplicable blurred. The doll Robert, always present in Eugene's room, seemed to be at the center of these disturbances. Its lifeless eyes and stitched smile, once merely odd, now appeared menacing, a silent custodian of the house's dark secrets. The Otto family found themselves increasingly isolated, the whispers in the night growing louder, more insistent. In the stillness of the dark hours, these soft murmurs carried a message that was felt rather than heard, a message that something unnatural resided within the walls of their home. Mysterious accident.
The unsettling events at the Otto house escalated with a chilling incident. One evening, as a storm raged outside, a loud crash echoed through the house. The family, alarmed, discovered a shattered mirror in the hallway, its fragments scattered like ominous jewels. No one was near the area at the time, yet the mirror lay in ruins. The next morning, Eugene was found in his room, unharmed, but visibly shaken. He whispered of Robert's anger, how the doll had raged against the storm. His parents, grappling with disbelief and fear, noticed the doll sitting quietly, its glass eyes reflecting the morning light in a disturbingly knowing way.
Days later, another incident occurred. The family dog, once friendly towards the doll, was found whimpering and cowering in the garden, refusing to come inside. Its eyes darted towards Eugene's window with palpable terror. When questioned, Eugene solemnly declared that Robert didn't like being ignored.
The house itself seemed to react to these events. Doors would slam shut without wind. Lights flickered without reason, and cold spots appeared randomly. The staff whispered of a malevolent presence, their eyes darting nervously to Eugene's room where Robert sat, ever silent, ever watchful.
The final straw came when a family friend, visiting overnight, awoke screaming from a nightmare. She spoke of a lifeless figure moving in the shadows, its stitched smile twisting into something sinister. Though she couldn't be sure, the description matched Robert. The Otto family, once skeptical, could no longer deny the bizarre occurrences surrounding the doll. Eugene, fiercely protective of Robert, became more isolated, retreating further into a world where only he and the doll existed. The whispers in the house grew louder, more urgent, as if feeding off the growing fear and confusion. The incidents, now more frequent and alarming, left the family at a loss. The once beautiful and lively home had turned into a place of unease and dread, with Robert at the center of the unexplainable events, a harbinger of something far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. Chapter 3: Eugene's Secret.
Hidden Room.
In the heart of the Otto house, unknown to all but one, lay a hidden room. This secret space, discovered by Eugene during a solitary exploration, became his refuge, a place where he and Robert could be alone. The room, small and cloaked in shadows, was adorned with peculiar symbols and old toys, creating an atmosphere both whimsical and unsettling. Eugene spent increasing amounts of time in this hidden chamber, often missing meals and ignoring his previously cherished activities. His parents, concerned by his withdrawal, questioned him, but Eugene's answers were always evasive, his gaze darting to where Robert sat, silent and watchful. One day, his mother, driven by a mix of concern and curiosity, followed him. She watched in disbelief as Eugene disappeared behind a bookshelf, revealing the concealed room. Inside, she found walls covered in drawings, strange, twisted scenes depicting figures with oversized, haunting eyes, and a constant, recurring image of the doll Robert. The discovery of this room sent a wave of distress through the Otto family. Eugene's father, a pragmatic man, insisted on clearing the room, believing it to be the root of Eugene's troubles. But Eugene's reaction was visceral, a mixture of anger and fear as he clutched Robert tightly, whispering frantic pleas into the doll's ear. The room's existence added another layer of mystery to the already strained household. Staff whispered about the boy's odd behavior and the room's eerie aura. Some refused to go near that part of the house, fearing what lay behind the bookshelf. This hidden room, once a place of solace for Eugene, had now become a symbol of the family's growing fears. It was a tangible manifestation of the strange hold that Robert seemed to have over Eugene, a hold that was tightening its grip with each passing day, drawing the boy further into a world where reality and imagination blurred indistinguishably. Double life. Eugene Otto, once a lively and sociable boy, now led a life divided. To the outside world, he maintained a facade of normalcy, attending school and interacting with peers in a subdued manner. But within the walls of the Otto house, a different Eugene emerged, one wholly devoted to the enigmatic doll, Robert. This dual existence began to strain Eugene's relationships. His friends, once close, found themselves pushed away, perplexed by his sudden secretive demeanor and unexplained absences. Whispers of Eugene talking to himself, or rather to Robert, circulated, fueling rumors and unease among his peers.
At home, Eugene's parents watched helplessly as their son retreated further into his private world. Conversations with Robert grew longer and more intense, often stretching into the night. They overheard Eugene debating, pleading, and even arguing with the doll, his voice laced with a desperate urgency.
The Otto family's social standing in the community began to suffer. Invitations declined, and the once frequent gatherings at their home ceased. The house, once a hub of social activity, now stood as a silent testament to the family's growing isolation. Eugene's academic performance also started to falter. Teachers reported a lack of engagement. His once bright eyes now often glazed over, as if his thoughts were elsewhere. Concerned, they reached out to his parents, who could offer no explanation beyond their own growing worries. In this isolated existence, Eugene found solace only in the hidden room and the company of Robert. The doll became his confidant, his advisor, his closest ally. To Eugene, Robert was no longer just a toy, but a living, breathing entity that understood him more than anyone else. As the line between reality and illusion blurred for Eugene, his double life became increasingly unsustainable. The secret world he shared with Robert was slowly consuming him, drawing him away from the life he once knew, into a shadowy realm dominated by the presence and influence of the doll. Chapter 4. Isolated Soul. Friends, farewell. The gradual estrangement between Eugene and his friends became starkly apparent. The playful banter and shared adventures that once defined their friendships gave way to awkward silences and uneasy glances. Eugene's peers, initially sympathetic to his odd behavior, began to distance themselves, the unease caused by his constant companion, Robert, too palpable to ignore. One by one, Eugene's friends found reasons to avoid him. Invitations dwindled, and when they did come, they were for Eugene alone, explicitly excluding the doll. Eugene, defiant, refused these overtures, his loyalty to Robert unwavering. The breaking point came during a birthday party for one of Eugene's closest friends. The air was thick with tension when Eugene arrived, Robert in tow. The other children, visibly uncomfortable, clustered away from him. Whispered conversations ceased as he approached, eyes darting towards the life-size doll with a mix of curiosity and fear. An ill-timed incident, a sudden gust of wind knocking over a set of cups, blamed on Robert's presence, led to an outburst from a parent, openly demanding Eugene leave the doll at home. Eugene's response was swift and emotional. He left the party abruptly, clutching Robert, his face a mix of anger and hurt. This event marked the end of Eugene's social interactions with his peers. He became a topic of hushed gossip, the strange boy who talked to his doll. His world shrank to the confines of his home and the company of Robert, who seemed to be his only friend left. Eugene's isolation deepened, his days filled with long conversations in hushed tones with Robert. His parents observed these one-sided dialogues with growing concern. The sound of their son's laughter, once a source of joy, now a chilling reminder of his increasing detachment from reality. The once vibrant and social Eugene was now a shadow of his former self, his life revolving around the mysterious doll. The Otto family, once a pillar of the community, found themselves increasingly isolated. Their home, a fortress of secrets and unspoken fears, with Eugene and Robert at its enigmatic heart. Disconnection from family. The chasm between Eugene and his family widened with each passing day. Meals, once a time for family bonding, became silent, tense affairs. Eugene's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Otto, struggled to bridge the growing gap, but their attempts were met with cold indifference from Eugene, who seemed to exist in a world inhabited only by him and Robert. Eugene's mother, once the heart of the household, wore a constant look of worry. She tried to engage Eugene in conversation, to participate in family activities, but he showed interest only in spending time in his room, whispering to Robert. Her maternal instincts told her something was profoundly wrong, but she was at a loss on how to reach her son. Mr. Otto, a man of reason and practicality, found the situation increasingly untenable. He viewed the doll with a mix of disdain and suspicion, blaming it for the rift in his family. He suggested removing Robert from the house, an idea that led to explosive arguments with Eugene, who accused his parents of not understanding or caring about him. The household staff, once part of the family's bustling life, now tread lightly around Eugene and his room. They shared stories of strange noises and an eerie feeling emanating from Eugene's quarters. Their once warm relationship with the boy had turned into one of cautious avoidance. Family friends, aware of the strange happenings, began to visit less frequently. The Otto home, known for its hospitality and warmth, now felt cold and unwelcoming. The presence of the doll seemed to cast a shadow over the entire house, its influence growing stronger as Eugene's connection with his family weakened. The once close-knit family unit was unraveling, strained by the unexplainable and the unseen. Eugene's retreat into his private world with Robert left his parents feeling helpless and heartbroken. The household, once filled with laughter and love, now echoed with the silence of a family torn apart, with Robert at the center, an unyielding symbol of the growing divide. Chapter 5. Shadow of the Curse. Terrible change. The transformation in Eugene since Robert's arrival was not just behavioral. It was almost physical. His once bright eyes now often appeared hollow, his laughter replaced by an unsettling silence. The once lively boy seemed to wither in the doll's presence, his vitality fading as if drained by an unseen force. Eugene's parents watched this change with a mix of horror and disbelief. The playful, imaginative child they knew was being consumed by a shadow, a darkness that seemed to emanate from Robert. The doll's constant presence in Eugene's life had become more than a peculiar obsession. It was as though Robert was leeching the life out of him. Sleepless nights became common in the Otto household. Eugene's mother would wake to faint murmurs coming from her son's room, finding him speaking in a trance-like state to Robert. On one such night, she overheard phrases that chilled her to the bone. Talk of secrets and promises made in the dark, a pact between a boy and his doll. The changes extended beyond Eugene. The house itself seemed to react to the doll's presence. Doors would close on their own, lights would flicker, and cold drafts appeared in closed rooms. The family dog, once Eugene's loyal companion, now refused to enter his room, barking furiously at Robert. Visitors to the house sensed this change too. A chill in the air, a sense of being watched, an oppressive atmosphere that seemed to center around Eugene and his eerie companion. Comments were made in hushed tones. Speculation about the unnatural bond between the boy and the doll. Eugene's behavior became more erratic, his moods swinging wildly. He would be found talking fervently to Robert one moment and sitting in silent contemplation the next. It was as if he was under a spell, bound to the doll by an invisible thread that grew tighter with each passing day. As the shadow of the curse grew darker, the Otto family found themselves caught in a web of fear and confusion, with the disturbing transformation of their son at its heart. The once bright and cheerful home had become a place of secrets and whispers, with Robert, the life-sized doll with glassy eyes and a stitched smile, at its eerie center. Deacon's warning. The Otto family's turmoil reached a new peak when the former housekeeper, who had gifted Robert to Eugene, returned unexpectedly. Her appearance was as sudden as her departure years ago, bringing with her an air of ominous revelation. She requested a private audience with Mr. and Mrs. Otto, her expression grave. In the dimly lit drawing room, the housekeeper, her features etched with years and secrets, began to unravel the tale of Robert. She spoke of her background in the spiritual arts, her voice quivering with a mixture of fear and regret. Robert, she confessed, was not just a doll. It was a vessel, a creation intertwined with rituals and incantations long forbidden and feared. The housekeeper's words hung heavy in the air. She warned of the bond between Eugene and Robert, a bond that was unnatural and dangerous. The rituals she had performed, meant initially as a protective charm, had gone awry, intertwining Eugene's life force with the doll. She spoke of signs to look for, the inexplicable events, Eugene's changing behavior, the oppressive atmosphere in the house, all pointing to a growing malevolent influence. She regretted her actions deeply, admitting that her intentions, though originally well-meaning, had unleashed something far beyond her control. The Ottos, skeptical, yet visibly shaken, listened as she outlined a way to break the bond. It would require another ritual, one that risked further upsetting the already delicate balance. The decision weighed heavily on them, torn between disbelief and the desperation to save their son. As the housekeeper departed, leaving the family with her ominous warnings and a solution fraught with uncertainty, the house seemed to grow colder, the shadows deeper. Eugene, oblivious to this exchange, continued his whispered conversations with Robert, the doll's stitched smile more enigmatic than ever. The air in the Otto household grew thick with tension and fear. The revelation from the housekeeper added a new, terrifying dimension to the events unfolding around them. With each passing day, the connection between Eugene and Robert seemed to grow stronger, more dangerous, and the path to saving Eugene more perilous and uncertain. Chapter 6. Time of Division. Family Conflict. The revelation from the former housekeeper ignited a fierce conflict within the Otto family. Mr. Otto, driven by a mix of fear and desperation, advocated for immediate action to sever Eugene's bond with Robert. His insistence met with staunch resistance from Eugene, who clung to the doll as if it were a lifeline. Mrs. Otto found herself torn, her maternal instinct to protect her son battled with the chilling reality presented by the housekeeper. She witnessed Eugene's transformation, the growing darkness around him, yet the thought of subjecting him to an unknown ritual filled her with dread. Arguments erupted frequently, shattering the already fragile peace of the household. Eugene, usually quiet and withdrawn, lashed out with uncharacteristic vehemence when the subject of Robert's removal was broached. His eyes, once full of innocence, now burned with a fervent, unsettling intensity. The house became a battleground, with tensions running high. Eugene's isolation deepened, his interactions with his family growing more strained and hostile. Whispered conversations between Mr. and Mrs. Otto often ended in hushed, worried tones, their voices heavy with the burden of an impossible decision. The staff, caught in the middle, spoke in low tones about the palpable unease in the house. Some began to leave, no longer able to bear the oppressive atmosphere and the constant undercurrent of fear. Amidst this turmoil, Robert remained a constant presence, its stitched smile and lifeless gaze seemingly mocking the family's plight. The doll's influence over Eugene was undeniable. He spoke of Robert not just as a friend, but as an entity with thoughts, desires, and a will of its own. As the family teetered on the brink of collapse, the unspoken question lingered in the air. What would happen if they attempted to separate Eugene from Robert? The fear of the unknown, of what the doll might do, or what it might make Eugene do, held them in a paralyzing grip. The Otto home, once a haven of happiness and love, had turned into a theater of psychological warfare, a family divided against itself, with a child and his eerie doll at the center of a spiraling nightmare. Atmosphere at home. The Otto household, once a bastion of warmth and joy, had transformed into a domain of oppressive unease. The very air within its walls seemed to have thickened, charged with a palpable sense of dread and anticipation. Shadows clung more persistently, and the usual sounds of the house took on a menacing quality. At the heart of this transformation was the omnipresent doll, Robert. Its stitched smile and glassy, emotionless eyes seemed to follow the family members, a constant reminder of the inexplicable and the unnatural. The once benign toy now felt like a malevolent sentinel, overseeing the disintegration of the family unit. Eugene's behavior became increasingly concerning. He roamed the house at odd hours, often found muttering to Robert in dimly lit corners. His laughter, once a pleasant melody in the home, now echoed eerily through the halls, often without discernible cause. His parents would wake to the sound of his footsteps, pacing back and forth in his room, a low monologue directed at his silent companion. The tension affected everyone. Meals were eaten in silence, the clinking of cutlery against plates echoing like distant chimes. Conversations were brief, often punctuated by long, uncomfortable pauses. Mrs. Otto's attempts to inject normalcy into their lives were met with mechanical responses, the family going through the motions of daily routines without any real connection. Visitors became rare, and when they did come, their discomfort was evident. The once welcoming home now seemed to repel, its atmosphere heavy with something unspoken yet intensely felt. Friends of the family left with hurried excuses, their glances lingering on Eugene and his unnerving companion. The house itself appeared to be in mourning, its vibrant colors dulled. The laughter and joy that had once filled its rooms, replaced by a suffocating silence. Even the garden, once Mrs. Otto's pride, had begun to wilt, as though reflecting the family's inner turmoil.
As the family grappled with the reality of their situation, the house served as a silent witness to their plight. The doll, Robert, sat in the midst of it all, an anchor to a steadily unraveling reality, a symbol of the creeping dread that had taken hold of the Otto family, turning their home into a prison of fear and uncertainty.
Chapter 7. Dangerous Rumors. Rumors in the village. In the once tranquil village of Key West, whispers about the Otto family and their eerie doll, Robert, spread like wildfire. The locals, usually not given to gossip, found themselves irresistibly drawn to the tale of the cursed doll and the family it haunted. Tales of strange happenings at the Otto house circulated in hushed tones at the local market, in the dim corners of taverns, and on the sun-drenched porches of neighboring homes. People spoke of the doll's lifeless eyes that seemed to follow one around, of the unnatural events occurring in its presence, and of Eugene's disturbing attachment to it. One story, in particular, chilled the listeners to the bone. A local boy, daring enough to peek through the window of the Otto house, claimed to have seen the doll moving on its own, its stitched mouth twisting into a sinister grin as Eugene whispered to it. The tale, embellished with each telling, became a haunting specter in the village. As these stories grew, so did a collective sense of unease. Parents warned their children to steer clear of the Otto property. Superstitious folk hung charms and whispered prayers, hoping to ward off any malevolent influence that might spill over from the cursed residence. The Otto family, once pillars of the community, found themselves increasingly isolated. Invitations to community gatherings ceased, and once friendly neighbors crossed the street to avoid passing too close to the house. The family's plight, intertwined with the dark legend of Robert, became a cautionary tale against meddling with the unknown. In the heart of the village, an undercurrent of fear took hold. The story of Robert was no longer just a tale to scare children. It had become a symbol of a deep-seated terror, a reminder of the darkness that can lurk within the most benign appearances. The doll's legacy, now etched into the folklore of Key West, left an indelible mark on the village. Its presence, an ever-present shadow in the collective consciousness of its inhabitants. Approaching danger. The sense of impending doom within the Otto household reached its zenith one stormy night. Lightning illuminated the house in sporadic flashes, casting long, sinister shadows that seemed to dance with a life of their own. The wind howled, a mournful symphony that resonated with the family's growing terror. Amidst this tempest, Eugene's behavior took a harrowing turn. He was found in the hidden room, the walls covered in frantic, disturbing drawings of Robert with multiple limbs, eyes everywhere. His voice, almost unrecognizable, was chanting in a rhythm that seemed to pulse with the storm outside. Mr. and Mrs. Otto, propelled by a mix of fear and desperation, decided it was time to confront the horror head-on. Armed with the housekeeper's instructions for a ritual to sever Eugene's bond with Robert, they approached his room. The air grew colder as they neared, their breaths visible in the icy atmosphere. Inside, they found Eugene in a trance, his eyes wide and unseeing, speaking in tongues, while Robert sat perched on a chair, its stitched smile more grotesque than ever. The atmosphere was thick with an electric charge, the air vibrating with an unseen energy.
As they began the ritual, the house seemed to react. Objects started moving of their own accord, the walls creaking as if in pain. Eugene's chants grew louder, more fervent, his body swaying in time with the invisible forces swirling around them. The climax came as a massive thunderclap shook the house, coinciding with a scream from Eugene that was both human and otherworldly. The doll, Robert, appeared to convulse, its limbs moving in jerky, unnatural motions.
In that moment, the line between reality and the supernatural blurred. The family, engulfed in a vortex of fear and chaos, fought to complete the ritual amidst the maelstrom. The house itself seemed to be tearing apart, the storm outside mirroring the turmoil within. The scene was one of utter horror and desperation, a family pushed to the brink, battling an unseen force that threatened to consume them. The sense of danger was palpable, a living entity in the room, as the Otto family struggled to reclaim their home and their son from the clutches of the curse that Robert, the once innocent doll, had brought into their lives.
Chapter 8. The Moment of Truth.
Secrets of the Past. In the aftermath of the harrowing night, the Otto family unearthed secrets that lay buried in their past, secrets tied to the origins of Robert the doll. Mr. Otto, determined to understand the source of the curse, delved into old family records and the housekeeper's cryptic notes. He discovered a hidden chapter in their family history, one that spoke of his great-grandfather, a man deeply involved in the occult. This ancestor had commissioned the creation of Robert, not as a mere toy, but as a talisman, imbued with ancient rituals meant to bring protection and fortune. However, the rituals were flawed, twisted by intentions not fully understood, creating a conduit for something dark and malevolent. The revelation sent chills down Mr. Otto's spine. The doll was never just a doll. It was a vessel, a repository for a sinister force passed down through generations. The housekeeper, once a young apprentice to a group of mystics, had known about this legacy, but had not grasped the full extent of its power until it was too late. As Mr. Otto shared these discoveries with his family, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The strange occurrences, Eugene's transformation, the oppressive atmosphere in the house, all were manifestations of a curse that had latched onto their family, a curse that had been dormant until Robert's arrival. The knowledge of this dark past brought a new level of horror to the family. They realized that their battle was not just against a haunted doll, but against a legacy of darkness that had entwined itself with their fate. The shadows in the house seemed to grow darker, the air heavier, as if the very walls were whispering the sinister truth of Robert's existence. This newfound understanding brought a grim resolve to the Otto family. Armed with the truth, they prepared to confront the ancient evil that had taken root in their home, an evil that had been hiding in plain sight. Embodied in the stitched smile and glassy eyes of Robert, the cursed doll. Deacon's Confession. The Otto family's quest for answers led them to confront the housekeeper, the mysterious figure who had first introduced Robert into their lives. In the dim light of the study, she sat, her face etched with lines of remorse and fear. What followed was a confession that unraveled the last threads of mystery surrounding Robert. Her voice, trembling with emotion, revealed her true intentions behind gifting Robert to Eugene. It was an act of retribution, born out of resentment towards the Otto family. She had known of the doll's dark legacy, its connection to the occult practices of Eugene's ancestors. By giving Robert to Eugene, she had unwittingly reawakened the dormant curse. She spoke of her realization, too late, that her actions had caused much more than petty revenge. The doll had become a conduit for a malevolent force, a force that fed on Eugene's innocence and grew with his attachment to Robert. Her attempts to reverse the curse, to sever the bond between Eugene and the doll, had only strengthened it. As she recounted her story, the air in the room grew colder, the shadows deeper. The family listened, horror-struck, as they understood the depth of their plight. The housekeeper's eyes, filled with tears, met theirs, conveying a silent plea for forgiveness. The confession ended with a warning. The bond between Eugene and Robert was stronger than she had ever anticipated. Breaking it would require a sacrifice, a risk that could either free Eugene or condemn him further. She provided them with a ritual, her voice a whisper of despair, cautioning them of the dangers it entailed. This revelation left the Otto family reeling. The truth about Robert, a cursed legacy intertwined with their own, was more terrifying than they had imagined. The once comforting walls of their home now felt like a trap, enclosing them with a malevolent presence that had been invited in, nurtured by their own flesh and blood. The housekeeper's confession marked a turning point. The Otto family realized the fight against the curse was not just for Eugene's soul, but also for their redemption, a battle against the shadows of their own past. Embodied in the sinister form of Robert, the doll that smiled with a secret only now fully understood. Chapter 9. The Final Confrontation. Confronting the curse. The Otto family, armed with the knowledge of their ancestral curse and the housekeeper's ritual, steeled themselves for a final confrontation. The air in the house was thick with a sense of finality, as if the very walls braced for the impending battle. In the heart of the night, under a moonless sky, they gathered in Eugene's room, where Robert sat, its stitched smile more ominous than ever. The ritual required all their willpower and courage, demanding a unity they hadn't felt in years. They formed a circle around Eugene and Robert, each holding an item from their ancestors, symbols of their determination to end the curse.
The ritual began with a chant, an ancient incantation that echoed through the house, its words a stark contrast to the silence of the night. As they spoke, the temperature dropped, their breaths turning to mist, and the shadows in the room deepened, swirling around them like dark, tangible entities. Eugene, at the center of the circle, appeared conflicted. His eyes, once lost in the depths of the curse, now showed flickers of awareness of the boy he once was. He looked at his family, a silent plea for help in his gaze, then at Robert, his expression one of fear and sorrow.
As the ritual reached its crescendo, the house seemed to shake at its foundations. A wind rose within the room, centered on Robert. The doll's limbs twitched, its eyes seeming to glaze over with a malevolent light. Eugene screamed, a sound of pain and release, as if the very essence of the curse was being torn from him. In that moment, the family felt a unity of purpose, a collective strength that defied the darkness. They held on to the chant, their voices stronger, more determined. The room brightened gradually, the shadows receding, the oppressive atmosphere lifting. The climax was sudden and unexpected. A blinding flash of light enveloped the room, and a deafening silence followed. When their vision cleared, they found Robert, motionless, its eyes dull and lifeless. Eugene collapsed, exhausted but freed from the curse's grip. The family, united in their relief and newfound peace, embraced. The curse was broken. The legacy of fear and darkness that had haunted their home finally laid to rest. The house, their sanctuary, felt like their own once again, free from the shadows that had lurked in its corners. The dawn that followed was the brightest they had seen in years, a symbol of their triumph over the darkness, a new beginning for the Otto family. Fateful night. As the Otto family prepared for the fateful night that would decide their future, a heavy sense of foreboding hung in the air. The house, usually a sanctuary, now felt like a stage set for a final, dramatic act. Outside, the sky was an ominous canvas of roiling clouds, reflecting the turmoil within.
Eugene, with a solemnity far beyond his years, held Robert close, his eyes betraying a mix of fear and resignation. His parents and the remaining loyal staff members gathered, their faces etched with determination and a hint of fear. They knew this night could end their nightmare or plunge them deeper into darkness. As the clock struck midnight, the ritual began. The house seemed to respond, groaning and creaking as if it too was part of the ceremony. Eugene, standing at the center with Robert, started to chant in a trembling voice. The words, ancient and powerful, resonated through the rooms, causing the lights to flicker and the air to chill. Suddenly, the room was plunged into darkness, the only light emanating from the circle where the family stood. The air crackled with energy, an electric tension that made their skin prickle. Shadows danced on the walls, forming and reforming into nightmarish shapes.
Eugene's voice grew louder, more confident, as if he was drawing strength from the very words he spoke. Robert, in his arms, seemed to come alive, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark. A wind began to swirl within the room, centered on the doll, growing in intensity with each passing second. The family, holding hands, formed an unbreakable chain of unity and strength. They repeated the chant, their voices merging into a powerful chorus that filled the space, combating the growing maelstrom.
At the ritual's peak, a scream pierced the night, a sound so primal and raw that it seemed to come from the very depths of their souls. A blinding light erupted, engulfing the room, the doll, and Eugene. Silence fell, heavy and absolute. When the light dissipated, they found Eugene, unconscious but alive, his expression peaceful. Robert lay beside him, inert, its once menacing presence reduced to just a lifeless doll. The family, exhausted yet relieved, knew the curse was broken. They had faced their darkest fears and emerged victorious, a bond forged in the fires of adversity.
As dawn broke, casting a soft light into the room, the Otto family looked upon each other with a new understanding and appreciation. They had survived the fateful night, their home reclaimed, their future theirs to write. The doll, Robert, now just a relic of a past best forgotten, was put away, a symbol of a battle won against the shadows that had once threatened to consume their lives.